Hello, America. Hello, world. Today is March 19th, 2022. I'm Bo Parfet. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Impact Podcast. I work for DLP Capital, and our CEO is Don Wenner, who's an amazing person. Speaking of amazing people, we have Dr. James Mault here, who we're so excited to have with us. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you.
All right, and I've got to let the audience know that Dr. James Mault just gave a riveting talk to a group of 200 to 300 people, and it was absolutely riveting and fascinating, and you were swamped with people after, so we're so grateful that you were able to carve out time and be with us today.
Well, thank you. I've never thought of myself as a riveter, but I guess cardiac surgeons could be riveters here and there. We use staplers, but thank you. It was fun.
Good stuff. I think the audience always likes to hear, hey, who are you, right? Where did you come from? So if you don't mind, can you tell the audience, hey, this is kind of who I am, a little bit of a background, and if you don't mind spending a little bit of time kind of on your childhood.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the prototypic Midwestern kid. Grew up in Cleveland, and for better or worse, it was during the '60s, and from birth, I was pre-programmed with dreams of someday becoming an astronaut, and I was fascinated with every fact and detail of the space program, to the point where I even wrote to the astronauts in the 60s to come visit my kindergarten class, and we had one of the very prominent Mercury astronauts come and visit, and all the way until 6th grade when I got glasses, I thought I was going to become an astronaut, but once you had glasses in those days, it ruled out being a jet fighter pilot because you had to have perfect vision, and so I had to figure out something else to do with my life besides being an astronaut, and took me about a year to come to the conclusion if I couldn't be an astronaut, then I should probably be a surgeon. And so, I grew up in a wonderful environment. Both my parents were school teachers, and brought up with the view of the world that you could be anything you wanted to be if you're willing to work hard enough and never give up. So I went to our town doctor in this small town. Kind of the biggest event of the 70s was putting a second stoplight on Main Street, so that gives you a sense of the town. And we had one doctor, and I went to him and I said, I want to be a surgeon someday. And he said, perfect timing. We're starting this thing called a athletic training program for the football team. And if you're interested, it's kind of medically related. If you're interested, we'll send you these graduate program for sports medicine classes at Case Western. And I said, sure. And suddenly in 7th grade, I was dissecting cadavers and got to go to the operating room, and I was sold. This is what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Graduated a year early from high school because I knew I wanted to be a surgeon, so started at the University of Michigan. My father died of a heart attack, so I was kind of on my own and had to find a job. And the job I got serendipitously was working for one of the most prolific surgeon entrepreneurs of the 20th century. He became my second father and my mentor. I became his protege, and he invented a system that today has saved millions of newborn babies and children and adults worldwide. It's called ECMO. And so he inspired me to be an entrepreneur at the same time as pursuing clinical medicine, and ended up at Duke to become a general surgeon and a cardiac surgeon. So there's the short story. Sorry it was so long.
Good stuff. And then along the way, I know that you have kids, so you're married with kids, and how many? And
yeah, so again, I grew up having the prototypic family of 3 kids, and So I always love the idea of having a family of my own. Have 5 kids, 4 boys and 1 beautiful girl right in the middle of those 2 older and 2 younger boys, and it's just been spectacular. I couldn't be more proud of, frankly, anything else above my wife and kids, who I'm madly in love with.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we do have a Michigan connection. We both went to the University of Michigan.
Go Blue.
Yeah, go Blue.
Finally beat Ohio State this year.
Yeah, I know, finally.
Hopefully N=1 is not a trend,
Yeah.
so we've got to make it hopefully 2 in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work with a lot of people from the South, and they're hey, what's Michigan like? You know, I heard the weather's bad, and I joke and go, well, Michigan has 9 months of winter and 3 months of bad sledding.
And growing up in Cleveland, it wasn't that much better. I have to say, it's just kind of the cold and drearies.
Yeah.
But Ann Arbor is just and Cleveland are wonderful towns with great people. But given the choice, I've now been in Colorado for 25 years and never leaving. And now you're up in Boulder.
Yeah, we keep following each other.
Yeah,
So
this is good.
Yeah, we're both in Colorado. Maybe you live 40 minutes away from each other, and yeah.
It's Colorado is just such an outdoor environment, great place to raise a family, and we ski every weekend and mountain bike and hike, and it's whitewater rafting. It's definitely a great place to be. And right now, as you know, it's the time of year where if you don't like the weather, check back in an hour, because it can be snowing 30 inches and then 2 hours later it's sunny and 60 degrees.
Absolutely. So you're a surgeon. You mind telling the audience, hey, what type of surgeon you are and maybe why you picked that specific discipline?
Yeah, so I again, once I had my mentor and was going to the operating room and participating in very complex operations, heart surgery and so forth, and pulmonary surgery, I was just the intensity, the complexity, and it's just so cool, right? And it's also like delivering babies in a lot of ways, because you take people who have a very bad problem, who could easily die, if you don't do the right operation, but also they're in a precarious condition. So you can really make a dramatic impact on someone, one life at a time. And so whether that's a cancer patient or a transplant patient. So I ended up going to Duke, and in those days you had to train as a fully boarded general surgeon. So I did a full general surgery residency, trained in trauma critical care, because I love all the data and the gadgets in the intensive care unit. I'm kind of a gadget guy. And then I trained as a cardiothoracic surgeon, and then thoracic oncology and thoracic transplant. So I left Duke in 1997 and came out to the University of Colorado to do heart and lung transplants and what's called thoracic oncology, and have been there ever since.
Wonderful. You said it was similar to child's birth, right?
Delivering babies.
Delivering babies, sorry.
Yeah.
So
because it's so, it's the outcomes are so overwhelmingly positive, right? You do cardiac surgery, 99% of the time it changes somebody's life. They go home in a few days, and they're able to do things that they weren't able to do before. Heart transplants and lung transplants are even more dramatic, right? Mm-hmm. You've got somebody within weeks or sometimes days of not making it. They've been waiting on a transplant list for an organ, and again, it's a very, very happy scenario. The outcomes are quite wonderful relative to the circumstance they were in before you did what you do.
Cool stuff. So you just as a reminder to the audience, Jim, your talk just moments ago was sensational. You said a lot of things that we can't get into all of them, but I do want to highlight a few. One of them that you said, and this kind of hit home to me because my wife almost died at childbirth, delivering.
Being delivered.
Yeah. No, she.
Oh,
a
during
C-section.
childbirth.
Yeah.
Oh,
during
okay.
childbirth. Our first son. It was via C-section, but it was kind of it's a longer story, but she almost died. So you said something. Can you talk a little bit about the death rate of mothers during childbirth? And I found that riveting. So go ahead.
Yeah. So it's unfortunately it's been going on for over a decade in the United States. What's called postpartum hemorrhage, and women dying from nothing other than delivering a baby is a crisis. And it's unfortunately, in the United States, disproportionate to the rest of the world. So we are an embarrassing outlier in that right now the statistics are 20 normal, healthy, childbearing aged women are dying during or immediately after delivery per 100,000 live births. And relative to the rest of the world, the next closest is down at 10. And it goes down from there, right? And so we're doing a poor job of keeping a close eye on women, especially immediately after childbirth. And we've turned childbirth into a little bit less of a medical setting and more of a relaxed spa experience. And I think it's a magical moment. I've got 5 kids, and I was there for each one of them as they were being delivered. But we have to realize that, a lot of women in the past centuries, 1 in 100 women used to die at childbirth. Now, 20 in 100,000 is in modern terms inexcusable. And it has a lot to do with the fact that it happens so infrequently. We don't have the right training and surveillance to be able to recognize a problem, because this happens very quickly, right? It can go bad quite suddenly, and then it's a fire drill, and it's hard to play catch up once somebody's crashing. And so I think people tend to, once the baby's delivered, everybody's is paying attention to this beautiful new baby and oohing and aahing, and they look over at mom, and mom's passed out, and everybody says, "Oh, mom's sleepy. She just went through childbirth. She's exhausted. Leave her alone."
Yeah.
Well, she's actually dying of hemorrhagic shock. She's unconscious because she's losing all of her blood, and nobody's realizing it. I mean, I'm simplifying this,
yes.
But the point being is closer monitoring is going to allow us to be able to detect the signs and symptoms of bad things happening earlier in their course. And that's what we want. We just want a heads up to say, hey, over here, take a look, this needs some attention.
Agreed. I want to talk more about the monitoring, and I think the audience is going to really want to hear about the monitoring piece and what you're doing in that regard. We do have the lightning round coming up, but before we get to the lightning round, which I know everybody loves, a couple more questions. I want to talk about the flight analogy from U.S. to Paris, but before we go there, you just said moments ago in front of a very large audience. And this is a test for you listening too. So, you with us on this podcast, put on your thinking caps. What are the most profound moments in the history of medicine? And I think there's 6. Okay, so I'll just say it again. What are the most profound moments in the history of medicine? So if maybe we could play some music at the moment, you know.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So I think it'd be neat to just, hopefully people are already making fun guesses in their head. That's why we're stalling a little bit.
Well, I'll do the definition first.
Okay.
So, because somebody will say based on what criteria. So the criteria is something in human health that has impacted, and we're talking about some breakthrough, epiphany, or technology or intervention of some sort that was devised by science and medicine. But the important criteria is that it is something that has had a direct, measurable impact on a global scale for at least hundreds of millions, if not billions, of human beings as a result of that epiphany or innovation or breakthrough. That's the criteria.
Okay.
All right. So now people are saying, I know it. It's fun because
it is fun.
I run around and people have. I'm surprised at how many people get very quickly, and then there's a few that it just isn't there, and you help them out. But usually people in these audiences, and I have fun doing this all the time. So usually 4, pretty commonly 5. Almost always 6 rarely.
Yeah.
Of the.
I think our audience just recently
They did great.
I think we got 5.
Got 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Good audience.
Let's hear.
Yeah,
Do you mind naming them?
So it starts with, and it is quite telling. Not a lot has happened more than 200 years ago in the history of medicine, and I'm a big. I was the president of our Medical History Society at the University of Michigan. So
cool.
So that's a whole nother conversation. And I have a dual degree in classical studies, so I used to study Greek and Roman history. But when you look at medicine, only in the last 200 years have these profound moments taken place, and only one of them in the past 50 years. So in other words, the 5 out of the 6 occurred now more than 50 years ago, and the first one was in the mid-1800s, which was the development of anesthesia. And again, as a profound breakthrough, prior to that discovery of anesthesia, you couldn't safely take out somebody's appendix that had appendicitis. You just died of appendicitis. If you had a clogged up gallbladder, you died of liver failure because nobody could go in and take out your gallbladder while you're awake. Right? You could try, but it won't go well. And so anesthesia was a huge breakthrough, right? There's so many things we can only do because of anesthesia. And then, the next one in that kind of chronology is what's called the germ theory. And it wasn't until the mid-late 1800s that we started to understand this thing called bacterium, and that washing your hands and cleanliness actually prevents disease and spread of disease. There was magical vapors, before then, and all sorts of things. As an aside, sorry, I had to digress a little bit, and I say this truthfully, but with a little bit of embellishment. It turns out our first president.
Was this McKinley?
No.
You mean the first president?
The first president.
I was going to say the first president that died from unclean hands. I thought I read something.
McKinley, that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, sorry.
But our first president actually died as a consequence of his medical care. George Washington himself. Because in those days, the common treatment for severe illness was to bleed someone.
Oh,
So
gosh.
he was you can look up the records. He was he had a pneumonia. And so the treatment was to cut a vein and bleed him. It was therapeutic bleeding was the treatment of the day. We bled him a liter of blood from his body, and he didn't get any better, so they bled a second liter. They ended up bleeding 4 liters of blood from the President of the United States. And then he died.
That's staggering.
Look up the records, yeah. So, there's a lot of lack of insight and understanding about human physiology right up until, the 19th century. So after anesthesia, the germ theory, and then we have the X-ray. And the ability for someone to look inside the body for the first time. And, the CT scans, MRIs, those are all kind of the same, but it began with the first X-ray in the 1800s by Dr. Roentgen. And there's a famous X-ray of his wife with her wedding ring on this skeletal hand, and it's in the archives at Mass General. And then you get into the development of vaccines, which undeniably has saved millions and hundreds of millions of human lives around the world. And then antibiotics. We didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have the ability to fight an infection up until literally the 1920s. And so we've only had antibiotics for 100 years. Otherwise, simple infections were often lethal. And then
another U.S. president story. So Teddy Roosevelt, great book for the audience called The River of Doubt, which Teddy Roosevelt and a team did a first ascent of one of the tributaries of the Amazon. And a big risk in the book was if you got hurt or if you got cut, hopefully your body could heal itself. If not, you're going to die.
Yeah, and there's so much bacteria in those jungle environments, and it's true. I mean, people come back with a little cut on their finger, and then it radiates up their arm, and they end up getting their arm amputated before the infection, took over your body. And now you just put a little, Neosporin on it, and you're good.
Yeah.
But we take so much for granted. And then, so that's 5, right? And then the 6th is actually the only remaining one that's happened in the past 50 years. And that's usually the one that people often don't get. And it's not Viagra, as we talk about. That hasn't saved a lot of lives. Maybe it's saved a few marriages, but or saved a few fun evenings. But it's actually something called lovastatin, and lovastatin has had a remarkable impact on global health by reducing the average cholesterol of the human population, and correspondingly reducing the risk of stroke and heart disease around the world. Again, more so in the Western worlds that can afford some of these medications, but nonetheless it clearly had on a public health scale, had a huge impact.
Wonderful. So those are the 6.
It's a fun conversation.
That's the one we didn't get, by the way, moments ago.
And that's not unusual. It's kind of a guess what I'm thinking criteria. And there's a lot of good ideas. People often say genomics, and genomics still has all this untapped potential. It's a big breakthrough of science and knowledge, but the translation to saving hundreds of millions or billions of human lives is not yet there. I think it has great promise.
Perfect. So those are the 6, everybody, for our audience listening. What if you had to guess the 7th? What do you think the next one would be? What would you say?
Yeah. So obviously, this is my preamble, the prelude to the point that we're making, and we are in a really exciting period of history. In the 1800s, we saw what's called the Industrial Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us learned that in grade school. Sadly, it probably doesn't get talked about much anymore. But the breakthrough of technology to be able to go across the country in a steam engine train versus a horse and buggy, the ability to have the telegraph communicate information through electrical wires and instead of the Pony Express. Mm-hmm. That changed a lot of things in the world. And then the ability to produce cars and steel and those. So we learned about that. And then now, in the most recent 50 years, we've experienced basically the computing and communications revolution, right? We've gone from, phones that were tethered to a cord on the wall to phones that we can carry with us and communicate with each other, and not just doing synchronous calls, but I learned as a father with our early teenagers, I would call them on the phone 10 years ago, and they didn't answer.
Yeah.
And I'd get frustrated, but if I texted, I'd get a response right back, and so they'd come home and I'd say, "You got to answer my calls," and they're like, "Well, Dad, if I'm talking to you, then I can't text with all of my friends at the same time." And it was really this epiphany because talking to them was occupying that one-to-one time and attention, but now with texting, they could do one-to-many simultaneously, mm-hmm. right? And so you kind of go, whoa, that's an interesting insight. And then you start thinking about the travel industry. So this communication and communication and computer revolution. We look at what's happened over the past 20 years. 20 years ago, you used to go to a travel agent to book a flight. Or at the very least, you had to call an 800 number to talk to an agent at United Airlines mm-hmm. to book a flight. I don't know if you're old enough, maybe, but I'm old enough. Okay. So in the 90s...
I'm coming up on 45.
Yeah, I don't know if you were booking flights yourself in the 90s, but anyways, point being is, if you have to get on the phone with someone and talk to them and say, I want to go to Chicago, I want to go next Wednesday, and I need to go in this time frame, and then I go, okay, well, here's your flights, and I go, how much? And then I go, it'll be this much. It's a 10, 20-minute conversation. And that agent at United is having that one-to-one conversation with you. So if United wanted to sell 100 plane tickets in the next 10 minutes, they would have to have 100 agents talking to 100 individuals, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But none of us do that anymore. I could have 10,000 people pull out their phone this same minute, pull up the United app, and all of us find the flight that we want, much easier, mm-hmm. choose the price, pay for the ticket, and even get our boarding pass. And United didn't have to have 100 or right. 10 or even one agent on the phone talking to us. And when you start to think about that transformation, the same thing is happening in almost every industry, the shopping industry, the banking industry. When's the last time you went to the bank to deposit a check? Yeah. We don't do that anymore. And if you do get one of those old-fashioned checks, now you just take a picture of it with your phone. Yeah. And I'm not driving to the bank to deposit a $30 check. So all of this has been this tremendous transformation. but for healthcare. And in healthcare, we have been, for a lot of reasons, healthcare is a lot of complex information. And it's a lot of experience and know-how in order to assimilate that amount of information and make sense of it from your body of knowledge and your body of experience. And so healthcare has been slow. It's been the last holdout, frankly. And it has to do with, it's not just about the communication revolution and the computer revolution. What we're now entering into, not just for healthcare, but for all of the transformational moments in history of our society, it's what's called the cognitive revolution.
Okay.
And so what you're doing now is the Internet of Things has exploded over the past 10 years, as I talked about in the session a little while ago. In 2010, there were more human beings on the planet than we had devices around us that were connected to the Internet, to the cloud. By 2025, there will be 50 billion, with a B, connected devices, connected to everything. Our refrigerators, our washing machines, our vacuum cleaners, our cars, our planes, everything around us now is now connected and has the ability to process massive amounts of information in very short periods of time, make sense of it, and do stuff on our behalf that would take us hours, days, and sometimes years to figure out. And I talked about smart cars as an example. We now have cars that have had computers for quite a while, but what's new is we've got cars that have a multitude of sensors, and these sensors are collecting all this rich data about how fast it's going and the angle of incline and the car in front of us, the car behind us, the car to our left, the car to our right. And as drivers, as frail humans, there's only so much information we are able to process in our heads in a very short period of time to make an assessment of all of these things going on around us. And then suddenly the car in front of us starts to slow down, and it takes us an extra millisecond to recognize it. And before we know it, we're slamming the brakes too late, and bam.
Yeah.
And yet our new smart cars.
And you mentioned cars and airplane. You mentioned we spoke about cars and airplanes. Another fun quiz for the audience is: were you flying from Chicago to Paris?
Yes, it was Chicago to Paris.
Okay, so Chicago. Here's the question, everybody. Chicago to Paris. You're on a nonstop flight. Call it 8 hours, and you ask the pilot, how long or how many hours or minutes are you actually flying the plane versus autopilot, correct?
Yeah, it starts with, for the audience, it always starts with, raise your hand if you or someone you know has ever flown in a plane, and obviously everybody raises it. And then I say, okay, here's the key question. Who was flying that plane, the pilot or the co-pilot? And it's a trick question because the answer is neither. And the reality is you just said, when I went up to the cockpit, and there's a brand new, beautiful 787 Boeing Dreamliner, 9 hours from Chicago to Paris, to Charles de Gaulle, and I wanted to take a picture of this cockpit because it's what's called a glass display. There's no more gauges and dials, and instead of 900 gauges and dials in the old planes of the 70s and 80s, this thing reduces all this information down to a single consolidated view. And And I said to the pilot, how much of the flight were you actually flying the plane? And he looked at me, paused, he smirked. He said, about a minute. And then the co-pilot, the smart ass that he was, he looked over, I think it was more like a minute and a half. And I said, really? And he said, that's pretty much the way it went. It was obviously very smooth, but once they get even up to the first 10,000 feet after takeoff, said they switch on the autopilot, and the autopilot flew that beautiful thing all the way across the Atlantic. And if you want it, it will literally have a glide path right into the landing, and it's actually a great thing. It's some people say, oh, wait a minute, that's going to replace the pilot. The truth is, it just makes us better. Mm-hmm. Technology is going to help us be better pilots, better doctors. It's going to help us see things and understand. It's going to make us better drivers. Yeah. I mean, frankly, I joke about it, but our kids will truly, our grandkids, not our kids, but our grandkids will sit on our knee and say, Grandpa, is it true your cars used to be able to crash into each other? Yeah. That sounds so cool, right? Because the cars that you drive in the next 10 years, it will be hard for those cars to crash into each other because of these smart systems. And that's a wonderful thing.
It is.
It's going to save lives. It's going to save fender benders that are a hassle to get your car repaired. And everybody wins.
Terrific. All right, let's jump to the lightning round. Are you ready?
All right.
Okay, so we've got some categories here, and for the audience,
everybody's always watching what I eat at a restaurant. Oh, it's the heart surgeon. I'm not ordering until I see. So I order the steak, and they go, "Oh, that's so good." I don't feel guilty eating the steak.
All right, so let's start with food. Are you ready?
Okay.
Here we go. All right, chicken or steak?
Steak.
Chicken or fish?
Fish.
Steak or fish?
Oh, gosh. More fish.
All right. Pizza or hot dog?
Pizza.
Cow milk or almond milk?
Oh, cow.
Coffee or tea?
Neither.
Banana or an orange?
Both.
Pineapple or mango?
Pineapple.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
All right. Okay. All right. Exercise.
Yes, I'm very favorable to exercise. Okay. Are we going to ask?
We got some categories.
Okay.
So the category of exercise. Sorry. Walk or jog?
Jog.
Jog or swim?
Jog.
Yoga or weightlifting?
Weightlifting.
All right. Okay. The category of sports: Olympic sports or pro sports?
Oh, pro.
Football or basketball?
Football.
Football or baseball?
Football.
Hockey or basketball?
Hockey.
All right, good stuff. Last category is people. Federer or Nadal?
Oh, gosh, both. Just not Djokovic.
Tom Brady or Drew Brees?
I went to Michigan. That's a silly question. Right. The GOAT is a Michigan alum.
That's right.
And that's the only place to be.
All right, I agree. Teddy Roosevelt or Franklin Roosevelt?
Teddy.
Bill Gates or Elon Musk?
Ooh, Elon.
All right, good stuff. Well, the lightning round's always fun because it's nice.
It's telling. Some algorithms there is going to spew out what psychiatric disorder I have based on that data.
All right, two last questions.
All right.
So there's a notion about, hey, people have strengths and weaknesses. Oh, focus more on your weaknesses. Some people go, no, wait a minute. You should maybe focus more on your strengths.
This is a great topic.
Yeah. What are your views on that?
Oh, I have very clear views. In fact, my leadership team and all the companies that I've created for years, and even my teenage kids when they were finishing grade school and applying to college, there's a wonderful exercise. It's called Strengths Finder. And
can people look that up on Google?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Finder?
Look,
Okay.
it's on Amazon. It's like $15, and it's a very, very well developed statistical tool that gives you it's actually like the fire round that you did. It's not even 20 minutes. It'll present a set of questions that you have to answer in 10 seconds or less, and if you don't answer it, it goes to the next question. And so it gets your immediate response. And after that 20 minutes, it will generate an analytic profile out of, I think, 33 different strengths. It will present to you your 5 top strengths out of 33. And I think this is a really important concept. And the fact is, we all have strengths, and then we have stuff that we're just not that good at. And when you're hiring somebody, you're obviously hiring them for their strengths. Mm-hmm. And you have some job you need them to do, and you're interviewing them, making sure that they have the strongest possible capabilities to fulfill that need. So if you're hiring somebody to be marketing, right? You want them to be a really, really strong creative marketer.
That's a great point.
Right? And so if you do their annual review a year later, you say, great job on all this marketing stuff. Wow. But you're not really that good at finance. And these are weaknesses I need you to work on. Yeah. I mean, really? Does that make... No. Why would you have people spending time trying to prop up their weaknesses? They're never going to be a CFO. That's not why I hired you. Mm-hmm. And this book this exercise is really, really good about that. So I'm as you could tell, you didn't even know this, but I think you encourage people to deliver on their strengths and optimize that. And then you find people that complement each other. If I got somebody that's strong over here but not over here, then I need somebody that's strong over there. And it works.
I like that.
It really works.
So to all those business leaders of for-profit or nonprofits out there, I love that advice, and I think that's sage advice. All right, last question. You are working on some pretty amazing things right now. I know the audience wants to know, a little bit more about it. Where can they learn more? Is there a website? So if you were to give kind of, and I know we're short on time a little bit, but in about, I don't know, in a minute or two, tell us the breakthroughs, right? The game changer that you're working on, and then how can people learn more or find out more or help or get involved?
Sure. Well, it's the elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. When we look at how we take care of patients, whether it's in the hospital or outside of the hospital, healthcare is driven by data. We have you come to the clinic or come to the hospital, and we take blood, we make measurements, and we're trying to collect a set of data about your condition, and then only from that data, and data includes observations. We ask you questions about what's been going on and what your symptoms are. But healthcare is predicated on having information in order to make a diagnostic interpretation and a treatment recommendation. So the problem is our gathering of that information hasn't changed for 100 years. For over a century, we take your temperature, we take your blood pressure, we listen, we take your heart rate, and for 100 years, that only happened if you went to the hospital or went to the doctor's office. and in the hospital itself, we're still paying people to walk around room to room to take those measurements, other than being in the operating room or the intensive care unit. So that data collection, and then when we talk about outside of the hospital, people who have very bad health conditions, heart failure and emphysema, or cancer patients, we frankly have no information about what's happening to them outside of them driving to the clinic for us to get a spot measurement. So all of that comes down to a mission I've been on for 2 decades to figure out, how do we make it really, really effortless, really inexpensive, and frankly ubiquitous, to be able to collect rich data sets, medical grade data sets, in any setting, both in the hospital and at home, and have that happen what's called passively, without having someone actively, manually collect that data, whether it's a nurse or a patient or family. And so, it's been a 20-year journey. When we send people home from the hospital, we've got no information, so we keep them in the hospital longer, probably unnecessarily in many circumstances. So all of this changes the way we take care of people in a hospital and at home. If we had a medical grade wearable that is smaller than a coin, that can last for 30 days without having to charge it or recharge it or pay for a new one, and the ability for all this rich data to be measured what's called continuously, instead of intermittent snapshots, and be able to have that all go up into the cloud, and just like that smart car, be able to see what's happening before it turns into that crash. And all of that has rolled into a company that I helped create. I take very little credit. We have an incredible team of talented engineers and data scientists that have brought this vision of mine to reality. So I'm only smart enough to put these people together. We created this company in 2018, built this wearable sensor, took it through FDA, and now it's able to make measurements of your vital signs and about 20 other physiologic parameters every minute, 1,440 times per day, 7 days a week for 30 days, and it's being used to monitor patients in the hospital, for patients going home from the hospital, nursing homes, cancer patients, and this is really the next new wave. This rich data allows us to bring healthcare into this new cognitive phase of it's a new frontier, frankly. We can take better care of more patients at a fraction of the cost.
Fabulous. So what's the name of the company, and what's the website, and how can people learn more?
Thank you. The name of the company is Biointellisense. So it came from, instead of intelligence, it's IntelliSense, because we're using sensors. But there is intelligence that comes from the data streaming out of those sensors, and obviously it's bio for human. So biointellisense.com. And we just announced the rechargeable version of what's called the Bio Button. And the button is, as I said, about the size of a coin. Yeah. And it's being applied for patients in hospitals, patients going home, long-term care facilities, grandma and grandpa. And I think you'll see one of these sooner or later in your pantry, and be able to put it on your child. It's monitoring temperature and heart rate and respiratory rate, and algorithms that can watch that data and let you know or your doctor know what a problem might be developing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much on behalf of DLP Capital and Don Wenner, our CEO. Thank you so much for today, and thank you so much for spending time with me on this Impact Podcast.
Absolutely my pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck.
Appreciate it.